I was desperate to move out of my house. Most of my friends were either in college or had moved somewhere else already, while here I was still living at home with my parents. Sometimes I wondered if living under a bridge would be better. Obviously, I knew it wouldn't really, but that's how badly I needed and wanted my own space. I was checking online for listings when I found a bunch of places in my area for rent on the Facebook Marketplace. I couldn't believe how easy it was to rent a place in this time that we live in. Being young and stupid, and probably a little bit naive, I found a listing on the marketplace that was the very definition of too good to be true. It was an entire 2-story house with 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a garage, and a finished basement. The pictures made this place look incredible. I messaged the guy, and since I was so eager, I asked if we could meet when I left work that night. He agreed to meet at around 8 p.m. I was already mentally planning my setup for the house after work as I was driving over. It soon dawned on me, though, that of all the pictures, there weren't any of the outside of the house or the finished basement. I didn't really think too much about it, but the thought did cross my mind that was somewhat weird. I pulled up to the house at around 8:15. The outside did look a little bit rough, and the neighborhood didn't seem ideal either. I kept ignoring all of that, though, because I kept telling myself this was an entire house just for me. I knocked on the front door, and this sort of disheveled-looking man answered. I walked in, only to find that the pictures didn't really look like this house at all. The inside looked quite old. Honestly, the more and more I looked at it, the more it looked like it was about to fall apart at any second. I was standing in the living room with this strange man. Also standing in there was a frail-looking woman. She was so skinny that it looked like her shirt was about to fall off her shoulder. I felt in situations like this, the person running the house or trying to sell it to you would surely walk you around and show you the interior. These two people made no such effort, though. They just kinda stood there looking at me. Finally, the guy mumbled something. "Yeah, so this is it. I should have said on the listing, but it's cash only." I asked if I could look around, and he looked kind of annoyed. He did accept, though. I looked into one of the rooms on the main floor, only to see it was completely dilapidated on the inside. I knew I didn't want this place anymore. I didn't even need to look at the rest of the house. I walked back into the living room and just said to the guy, "Hey, so thanks for meeting me, man, but unfortunately I think I'm going to have to pass." The woman looked like she was about to start crying. "Look, I know it needs a little bit of work, but you should see the basement before you leave." The woman ran over to the door and opened it. She held her arms out, pointing to the basement as if presenting it to me like some sort of prize. Since I have a really hard time saying no, I walked over and stood at the top of the stairs. I was thinking there was no way I was going down there. As soon as I looked into the darkness at the bottom and knew I could see nothing down there, I heard the man say from behind me, "The light switch is downstairs. Just go down and we'll be right behind you." The woman put her hand on my shoulder and sort of started to nudge me downward. I guess that all I needed was that literal push to push me in the right direction of getting out of there. I turned around and started swiftly walking toward the door. I thanked them for their time. Well, the guy clearly didn't like that at all. He ran over and stood in front of the door. The already creepy and disheveled man now looked even more unsettling. He was staring at me with these bulbous eyes and started to reach into his back pocket. As he stared directly at me, he said, "You wanted a place. Pay up or you're not leaving." I lied and told him I didn't have any money on me. He started to walk toward me and sized me up. I could see in my peripheral vision that the woman was moving in behind me. The man started to struggle to grab whatever he was concealing in his back pocket. I used this opportunity and reacted instantly. I ran right through the guy and pushed him out of the way, then ran toward the door. When I went to open it, I noticed it was already locked. The guy must have locked me inside when I wasn't looking. I hurried and unlocked the door and made a mad dash out to my car. I heard the woman screaming from inside and the man seemingly running after me. As I started to drive away, I could see he was standing at the bottom of the driveway. Thank God I never saw any sort of car start to pursue me after. I don't think these two had a car at all, if I'm being honest. I was so terrified I didn't drive home that night. Feeling a sense of urgency and concern for my safety, instead I immediately went to the nearest police station to report the incident. The officers listened attentively to my account and assured me they would look into the matter. They decided to visit the house, but apparently upon their arrival, the couple was nowhere to be found. It appeared they were squatters or had hastily vacated the premises just before the police arrived. Although I never discovered their true intentions, I was relieved that they weren't there anymore. The police assured me they would keep an eye on the area and encouraged me to reach out if I encountered any further issues. All I know is that I'm never looking on Facebook Marketplace for a place to rent ever again. This is a short story that happened to me several years ago when I was in junior high school. All my friends got to travel to Myrtle Beach with the baseball team for spring break. Since I didn't play baseball, I was stuck at home. My one friend Dave was home too, since we were the skaters of the friend group. We spent most nights of the break hanging out together and not really doing much of anything, except for one night. We stayed at Dave's house. He lives literally in the middle of the woods. The closest neighborhood isn't really that far away, but because of where his house is located, it truly feels like the middle of nowhere. Toward the end of the break, we snuck out of the house one night to see a girl who lived nearby. She and a few of the other girls from school were still in town, and we figured we would go and hang out with them. Like I said, it wasn't really far away. Just a sort of unnerving walk, because there aren't very many lights and most of it is in the seclusion of trees and rocks. We had an awesome time hanging out with the girls. I liked this one girl at the time, so it was great to be able to spend so much time with her. When we were walking back to the house that night though, we noticed some random guy following us. I didn't really think anything of it. Dave was freaked out though. I told him to just relax. The guy was following us closely, but not close enough for us to need to panic. When we made it back to his house, I watched the guy continue walking up the street. He never seemed to look back once. I looked at my buddy and told him that he was freaking out for no reason. The next night, we hung out again. His parents were going to be out of town for the weekend, so he was going to have the house all to himself. Since he was embarrassed by his house, he didn't want to have anyone over. Trust me when I say I pushed very hard for the girls to come over too, but I lost the argument in the end. I told the girls we couldn't hang out there, so instead Dave and I walked over to her house again. This time we spent a more considerable amount of time there, and didn't walk home until after about 3 in the morning. Dave was relieved on the way home that we didn't have anybody following us this time. I helped him close up the house and we got comfortable in the living room before passing out on the couches. At this point in the night, it was actually one of the best nights of my life. I actually got to kiss the girl I liked so much, and I legitimately felt invincible. Not long after lying down though, we heard a sudden knock at the door. We both froze in place. "Who is that?" exclaimed Dave. The knock came again, a low rhythmic knocking. Each bang on the wood made my hair stand on end. I slowly got up, and standing a few feet from the door, I called out, "Who is it?" There was no response right away. Then though, a young female voice shouted from the other side, "Hey, I was wondering if I could hide inside." I didn't say anything right away. The absurd nature of that statement and the calm tone of the woman's voice left me speechless. Before I could say anything, she spoke again. "It's going to be too late if you don't let me in. Can I please hide inside your house?" When I said I was speechless, I mean I was absolutely at a loss for words. I had a million things flying through my mind, and I didn't know what to do. My instincts told me that this must be one of the girls playing a joke on us. But I didn't recognize that voice at all. I decided not to answer, and Dave decided the same. We sat there in silence, and then I noticed the doorknob starting to slowly jiggle back and forth. It became more aggressive with time. Then the calm voice from the other side instantly became more sinister. "Open the damn door now!" I was finally able to shout to go away. I was going to call the police. There were no sounds for a few seconds. Then the woman spoke again. She started in a soft tone, and in the middle of her sentence, I could hear her getting sinister once more. "Honey, if you don't open the door right now, I'm going to lose my mind." Dave finally jumped up from the couch and shouted at this person to go away. Then, though, we could hear a second voice from behind the door. It was a deep voice, clearly that of a man. "Good call, bud. Very, very good call." Right after he said that, I thought I could hear what sounded like footsteps walking away. I looked out the window and saw two people walking down the street. One of them looked suspiciously like the person from the previous night. They just had a very similar stature. We were terrified and stayed awake the rest of the night. Since his parents weren't home, we didn't call the police, though obviously we should have. Dave was scared his parents would get mad if the police showed up and they weren't home on Sunday morning. When his parents finally did come home, he told them what happened, and they instantly called the police, calling us stupid for not doing so. I mean, better late than never, I guess. Since several hours had passed since the woman had been at the door, the police were honest with Dave's parents and told them they would probably never catch these two people. They assured us, though, they would be on the lookout for any similar incidents. I have no idea what those two wanted or who they even were. I don't even like being outside at night anymore. That night really messed me up for a long time, and I'm still trying to recover from the nightmares I endured because of it. The events of this story took place just a few days ago, so they're still fresh in my mind. I suppose this may be more creepy and flat-out weird than scary per se, but the more I sit and reflect on it, the more I think to myself this could have turned into a real nightmare. Just for a little backstory, I worked as a sort of freelance camera operator. Local artists, students, and even random people hire me to record content for them. I've done everything from documentaries to weddings, and I even shot a short film about aliens for some guy. I'm not rich, but I do make enough to pay my bills, and I get to do what I love while doing it. About a week ago, I got into a car accident though, and my car was completely totaled. Now, that's a side note that could be its own horror story. An old lady fell asleep behind the wheel, crossed over the median, and hit me head on. The fear of seeing a car coming directly at you full speed was one of the worst things I ever felt. Fortunately for me, that particular story ends right there, and the old woman and I were left completely unharmed. My camera, however, was not quite so lucky. Along with my car being totaled, my camera was destroyed in the incident as well. When the woman hit me, due to the impact, my camera flew off my passenger side seat and went right through the windshield. I ended up crying about my camera. The car accident was on a Wednesday, and I really needed that camera for my Saturday job. I started to text everyone I knew to see if I could borrow one of theirs, but nobody had a camera that I could use. I thought maybe I could use my iPhone camera, but I knew that would prove to be more trouble than it was worth. One of the people I texted, though, told me to check on Facebook Marketplace. I loved their idea and was surprised I hadn't thought about it sooner. I couldn't believe all the different stuff I was finding there. I was trying to focus on the one thing I really needed though, which was that camera. Eventually, I found a guy named Devin who was selling a camera that was even nicer than mine, with a microphone to go along with it. I didn't own one at the moment. He was only asking for $100 for all of it, so I felt like I couldn't resist that offer. I told him I needed it right away, and he agreed to let me come pick it up right after we messaged back and forth. I didn't feel weird or sketchy about any of this. The guy lived in a fancy building downtown in one of those luxury apartments. It was also early afternoon, so I wasn't worried about meeting some strange person at night in the middle of nowhere or something. I borrowed my mom's car and drove down to that apartment. The guy lived on the 12th floor, all the way at the end of the hall. I remember just staring out a window at the end of the hall for a minute or two before I finally knocked on his door. When I knocked, he answered right away, almost creepily fast, like he had been standing there waiting for the minute I walked in. He seemed like a fairly all-right guy though. He was good-looking and dressed in nice clothes, tall and had the whitest teeth I'd ever seen in person. We made small talk for a while, talking about cameras and what I did for a living. He then went on to tell me he did some acting for a while, and he made most of his money as a model. I was interested, so I was genuinely listening to the guy's stories. Finally, he walked over to a room on the far side of the apartment and said in a very calming voice, "Okay, well, the camera's in here. Let me grab it for you real quick." As he was entering the room, he stopped for a second though and turned back to me. "You know, being a camera geek like me, I think you'd love to see my new camera setup. Why don't you come check it up while I pack the other one away and get everything else for you?" If you're listening to this, you may be wondering how I could be so stupid as to follow a stranger into a small room. Well, the answer is the guy had totally disarmed me. He gave me no red flags or any other indication he might be a sketchy person. I followed the guy into this room, and he shut the door behind me. This was the first indication that something was wrong. I looked around the room, and there was nothing in there except for a single camera on a tripod. In an extremely creepy voice, he whispered in my ear, "You know, you'd make a great model." I didn't answer him. I turned around, opened the door, and left the room. I ran out of the apartment without the camera he was allegedly selling. I don't think he attempted to pursue me, though I'm not quite sure. He didn't message me again either, and that was the end of that encounter. I realized nothing technically happened to me, but once the door shut behind me and he was looming over me, I knew something wasn't quite right. As the days continued to roll on past that afternoon, I kept on wondering to myself, what if I didn't leave? Was this guy some kind of creep or just genuinely weird? I had no reason to call the authorities since, like I said, technically nothing happened, but I worry some other woman may fall into the same trap I did. I noticed the posting is now gone. I went back on the marketplace and went to pick up another camera from an older guy the next day. This time though, I made sure I went with a friend of mine just in case. If I ever see that guy again, I'm running as far as I can in the opposite direction. Over 4 years ago, I went to work in a warehouse in the small town that I'm from. I decided to leave though after my health started to get worse. I was diagnosed with panic disorder and severe anxiety after the situation that I'm about to tell you. This changed the way I developed friendships after that job, that much is for certain. So I started this job on April Fool's Day of 2018. Needless to say, I had no high expectations of this job at all. All I wanted was to do something, get paid, and go home. I had 2 little ones waiting for me back there, and many things I could work on as well. The job itself wasn't hard, and made some decent money for all the duties considered. I really couldn't complain much. I worked second shift for about 5 months, and then I went to the day shift. While working on second shift, I kept mostly to myself, until one day I met someone from one of the lines after we struck up a conversation about gaming. For the sake of anonymity, we'll call him JF. Well, JF seemed like a pretty good guy, and we had a lot of things in common as well. I went home that night and he popped up as a suggested friend on Facebook, so I decided to add him. When I did so, we started talking more at work until he suggested we should hang out outside of it, and so we did, pretty frequently at that. We were friends for a month at this point, when one day he decided he was going to introduce me to his partner. She seemed decent at first, super nice, didn't seem to be judgmental either, so I thought she was pretty cool. From then on, I would hang out with him when my kids were spending time with my mother. One day, we were talking at a restaurant when he started to vent to me. Dude, she's such a bitch sometimes. The other day, I forgot to take the trash out and she threatened to stab me. I've never been in a relationship where someone's threatened me like that. I think she's got good intentions though, so I don't know. When he said that to me, I was concerned, but of course, we've only been friends for a month or so. I thought maybe he was just joking morbidly, so I chuckled at him. He gave me a pretty serious look though. I'm not joking, she really did say that. I got very concerned. Fast forward about 8 months. They're still together, and we all hung out pretty regularly. I forgot about the things he'd told me that day. One day though, we were all talking and he seemed a little bit off that day, so I asked him what was wrong right in front of her. He flashed a smirk and said, "Nothing, dude, I'm just a little bit tired." He didn't have his eyes on me though, he had them on her. When we went to work the next day, I once again asked him what was wrong. "Okay, so you promised to keep this a secret between us?" Of course, I agreed. He said that he was breaking up with her, and she went a little bit crazy. He said she'd grabbed her gun, pointed it at him, and said, "If I can't have you, then no one will." He told me he'd managed to defuse the situation and was trying to look for a way out. Not really knowing what else to say, I just said, "If you need to go somewhere then, you can stay with me until you get her out of the house." Fast forward another year. He finally decided to leave her fully. When he did, she flipped out again. This time though, he told her over text. She said she was going to find him and kill him. He was actually out of work that day, on a vacation day. He sent me a text too. "Hey, let me know if she comes over looking for me." That struck me as odd, because I had no idea of the situation currently unfolding. She did come into our job and asked me where he was. I have no idea. I thought he was with you and you guys went out of town or something." She rolled up her window and drove off. I called him and told him she'd just come by, and he called the police about it. They found her just up the road from his house with a loaded gun in the car. 2 months later, he decided to talk to her again. When he did, he had something to tell me. When he called me, he asked if I had seen her around, and I hadn't. He then said this to me. I would take some vacation days if I were you." I asked him why. "Because she's out of jail. I heard her cousins are in town trying to find the people she has beef with, and I guess you're one of them." At that point, I was terrified. I grabbed my kids and got out of town. I took 2 weeks off work too. Came to find out the next day, her and her cousins went to the next town over and shot 3 people in an apartment and killed them. I got the news about it the day after it happened. The reason why he knew they were coming after me is because apparently they'd made a Facebook Messenger group and accidentally included him, and it had a list of names. Everyone regarded it as spam and decided to disregard the message, but he knew exactly what it was. 3 of the names on that list were the people that got shot. The 4th name on that list was mine. After they found the evidence, he decided to go public about the group and the screenshots that he had. They were all charged with first-degree murder. From then on, I was very careful about who I would stick my neck out for, because even though he knew the context of that list and her intentions, he decided not to inform anyone but me on it. Needless to say, we aren't friends anymore, and I think I dodged a bullet.